we have Dr. Winford James. Dr. Winford James,
Anselm,
welcome.
how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, sir. Welcome to In the Village with the Dark Triplets on WZYE 95.9 FM. We have with us Tony, and we have with us Gary as well. We are really happy that a person of your stature could join us here in the Village with the Dark Triplets.
It's my first time, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
welcome, Doc.
Thank you so very kindly, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Dr. James. It's good to get
much.
some response from Tobago. We are very concerned about what's taking place in the entire country, but there's some deep concern about the people in Tobago as to how they're being treated, and we would like to have them to have a little more liberation in moving forward in life, instead of being, my point of view is that it seems to me that Tobago is being suppressed by the central government. That is in my point of view, and you could enlighten us better on that.
But whenever you guys are ready.
Well,
ready?
Yeah, Dr. James, before you start, right, I wanted to listen to something that was stated by Assemblyman Joel Jack, and then you can give us your comments on that. Here it is. Here we go.
First and foremost, and as Secretary of Finance and Deputy Chief Secretary, let me say that I am excited with the current document that is before us. I think it's a document that really improves and enhances and gives greater autonomy to the people of Tobago. We have an increased provision whereby we have moved from the band 4.03 to 6.9 to a floor or minimum of 6.8% of the national budget.
Okay.
So, Dr. James, what is your comment?
Well, Mr. Jack is probably misleading himself. On the one hand, he's saying that Tobago, the bills are granting Tobago greater autonomy, right? But in the very next breath, on the other hand, he's saying that we have moved from 4.03 as a percentage of the national budget to 6.8. In other words, for him, greater autonomy is achievable, or achieved, if you wish, through Tobago getting more money from the national budget than it's accustomed to. You don't get autonomy that way. If you're talking about amending the Constitution to give Tobagonians more, well, not even more, control over their destiny. Because you see, this is very complex. But let me go back to the beginning of this thing. The new bills amend the preamble to the Constitution. And in amending that preamble, the bills focus on two things. The preamble I'm talking about focuses on two things. One is equality of status, and the other is self-determination. Now, Mr. Jack did not explain those two concepts. Everything swings on those two concepts. And I didn't put the concepts there. It is the JSC who did, right? Or at least maintain the concepts there. Equality of status and self-determination. Now, I started off saying you don't achieve equality of status or self-determination by moving the percentage of the budget that is given to you from 4.03 to 6.08. That doesn't give you autonomy. And if you guys want, we could have a conversation on what is equality of status might mean, and also self-determination. But I want to make another point on what Mr. Jack said about the movement upwards from 4.03%. Those of us who are responding to the JSC and its proposals for equality of status and self-determination, do not want any solution that favors Tobago over Trinidad. We want equal status, which means that we must not have an advantage in the way we are funded. Do you know where the 4.03 has come from? That was from the time when 𝗪𝗬𝗘𝗧𝗧 was the chief secretary. Right? In fact, he was the island's first chief secretary. Before him, you had chairman, Robinson himself, the first chairman, and Jeff Davidson, second chairman, and I think Lennox Denoon as well. Anyhow, the point is, do you know where that 4.03 came from? Well, 𝗪𝗪𝗘𝗧𝗧 activated a clause in the House of Assembly Act, right, which had to do with a dispute resolution commission that was querying, at least the 𝗪𝗪𝗘𝗧𝗧 party was querying the percentage of the budget that Tobago should have. Before that, there was no formula, and there was no lower floor for the determination of how much Tobago would get in the budget. And so that commission met and decided that population was a good basis for so doing, so that every citizen must have an equal share in the budget. Citizens in Trinidad and citizens in Tobago. Mm-hmm. And when they worked it out, each citizen of the country, not of Tobago and not of Trinidad by themselves, but the whole of the country, each citizen, it was calculated that each would have 4.03%. And therefore,
so each citizen was calculated at 4.3%, 4.03%.
Yes, for each citizen in the country.
Right.
And that 4.03% was used to determine how much Tobago would have from the budget, so that the rest of the budget, actually it was a range, as Joel said, but the bottom line was 4.03. Tobago got that, and that was fair population-wise. Okay?
Right.
The rest of the budget went to Trinidad. So we are talking about over 95% of the budget went to Trinidad. But you see, we're using a dispassionate formula. Nothing emotional about this, right? Per capita population, right? So if you calculate each person, right, to have a share of 4.03, then you have to use that, if you're using population, use that calculation to determine how much money Tobago would have from the budget, okay? Now, what the new bills are proposing is an increase of that. Now, of course, the population has grown over time. That was, 𝗪𝗪𝗘𝗧𝗧 was in the 1990s, and the population has gone up, and now it's about 5%, right? It's more than 4.03. It's about 5%. And even so, that would be fair, because you have to use, as I said, at this passionate basis. And so the new bills are proposing, they are proposing 6.08 for Tobago. Where that figure has come from is anybody's guess. The choice of that percentage does not follow any economic principle that I'm aware of. What I know,
Dr. James, where do you think that number comes from? Where do you think that number comes from?
They plucked it from the air. I don't know. It must have been in the air. I don't know your voices yet, so I can't distinguish between one
that's
person
okay.
and the other. So
that's okay.
I can't say who's talking.
No, that's all right.
Great.
So you don't. Yeah. So that number, right? The government haven't come to Tobago and says, this is how we came up with this new number.
No, I'm not aware that they answered that question. What I was going on to say is that 6.08 is patently unfair to the Trinidadian citizen, because you're giving the Tobago citizen some 2-point-something% more than each Trinidadian will get based on the population criteria. You got the point there?
Yeah. So what do you think is the right number? What do you think is the right
No,
number?
there's no right number. What you need to do, and we're going to discuss that tonight, what we need to do is to use a combination of per capita of population and, of course, the developmental wealth, the resources for development that the country has. And I don't mean Tobago only when I talk about the country. I mean the whole country. So we will come to that. But first of all, we have to take this thing slowly, because these ideas are very complex. So that we are talking about how you fund the budget. Rather than putting a particular percentage in the Constitution, we prefer that a formula is put, like the formula I just presented to you guys there, the formula in relation to 4.03. And that 4.03 we are proposing, that is, it is not 4.03, it is the formula of our population here, the share of the population that each citizen should have. You with me there, right?
Yes.
So you put that formula in the Constitution, and over time, it's going to be a dynamic business. Over time, the exact percentage will change. Okay? Now, so I was saying a mixture of that formula and a formula still to be worked out of what Tobago's contribution to the national wealth is. Right? And you take a percentage of that as well. And you say, well, look, based on your contribution to the wealth of the country, this is the percentage you should have for development purposes. And when you develop yourself, Tobago, you are developing the country in the process. So understand that what we are looking for, or people like me, are formulas for Tobago to be funded that are not exceptional to Tobago, that do not give Tobago an unfair advantage over our brothers and sisters in Trinidad. But in
Dr.
order
James,
to do that, sorry?
I don't mean to cut you, but I heard the Prime Minister on Rise and Shine, Brother B, one morning, and he was saying that the monies, the resources of Tobago is already in that 4.03%. Right? And if the resources that, whatever resources Tobago has, that's already in the budget. And if now Tobago wants that their own resources separately, he said that's double dipping.
Oh, no, not at all. But I don't know. But apparently he doesn't know how the 4.03 was arrived at. Because the 4.03 had nothing to do with resources that Tobago had. As I explained to you, and as I said to you again, we have to take our time here. If Dr. Rowley said that, I didn't hear him say so, but let's assume that you are right, that he actually said so. I listened to most of the tape, but I didn't hear that. If he's saying that, then he has no clue as to how the 4.03 was arrived at. The idea of double dipping cannot arise because the 4.03 had to do with head of population. Each citizen in the population having the same share, and using that, now you have the number of citizens in Tobago and you have the number of citizens in Trinidad, but we put them all together and we say each citizen is worth 4.03, right? And so we give Tobago the 4.03 of the population, right? And if we were to do the same thing for Trinidad, that is to say the remaining 95 point whatever, and we multiply that by the 4.03, we will have the budget amount for Trinidad. That has nothing to do with the resources we have. That has to do with population. And that is something that is used around the world, by the way. So if Dr. Rowley said, or you heard him say that, then I would have to say that Dr. Rowley does not have a clue as to how the budget has been determined over the last how many years? Do you understand that point?
Oh, absolutely. And Dr.
Right.
James, I just want to say something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you divide 60,000 by 1.390 by 1,390,000, you get 0.04%, right?
Why would you do that, Matt? Why
No,
would
no,
you?
I was just doing it from a mathematical perspective, right? Because there's 60,000 people in Tobago, right? There's 1.39 million people in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right.
So if you divide the 60,000 population in Trinidad and Tobago is 0.04% of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, but that's just the reverse of way of doing the maths. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying there?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you have to have a budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a budget, and you have to divide Tobago's share, the budget by Tobago's share. Not so?
Right. I understand.
Right. You have to have a budget, whatever the budget is, and the budget is not going to be static. Over time, it's going to change. And you are going to take 4.03 or whatever budget you have and say that is for Tobago. That has nothing to do with resources. It has to do with population.
Okay. All right.
All right. You got that point? I decided I'm not rushing tonight, because I've discussed this matter before, and I know how difficult it is.
Well, I don't want it to rush, but Dr. James, quickly. Sometimes we have 1 or 2 questions in the chat. I just want to give you 1 or 2 questions in the chat.
That's
One
fine.
person says, Dr. James, hold on. He says, hold on, Dr. James. Dr. James, is a federal state for Tobago the answer?
So does he want me to answer that question, move away from the point and answer the question?
You can come back to it.
A federal, you see, I don't know what he means by a federal arrangement. I'm going to assume, because you can't really stop to ask the caller or the commenter what he means, right?
Right.
But one concept of a federal arrangement is that it involves more than one state. In the case of Tobago, it will be 2 states, 2 islands, each of which will be a state. Each island, of course, determining matters for itself, managing itself completely. That is to say, Tobago managing itself, right, developing its own system of government, of representative government, and Trinidad doing the same. But because you want a federal arrangement, you have an umbrella, so to speak, central government or national government over the 2 states, dealing with matters that are common to both states. Some people say, well, that is a good solution. I know one of the persons from Trinidad who favors that idea is 𝗪𝗶𝘁𝗵. You know 𝗪𝗶𝘁𝗵, right?
Yes.
Right. He has said more than once that he likes a federal arrangement. But you can have a federal arrangement without having, without declaring that Tobago is one state and Trinidad is another state, right? So I hope that answers the question for the person whose question you're passing on. But that gives me the opportunity to say that in order to determine, right, how else you are going to fund, because there are resources the country has, right? Everybody knows that Trinidad and Tobago has oil and gas, right? We have hydrocarbon resources. And we know that it's a lump sum for everybody. It is not carved up between the 2 islands, because we speak of the unitary state, and when we deal with the outside world, we deal with the outside world as one country, so that the wealth in the seas belongs to the country of which Tobago is a part. However, if you are going to have to determine how much Tobago contributes to the island, to the country, you've got to have definitions. And previous iterations of the bill had a definition of Tobago Never a definition of Trinidad. None of the bills that have come to us carry a definition of Trinidad. It's always been Tobago. And there was a time when the maritime boundaries of Tobago were given as part of the definition of Tobago. At the current time, it's been totally removed. Right? Now, we probably might not have time to explain why it's been totally removed. But Tobago now does not carry a maritime definition. According to the JSC proposals, what it does carry is an inland, an internal land definition. It has to do with what is on land in Tobago, what is onshore, not offshore. Right? But if you went offshore and you take what is the measurement that is used internationally to determine what are states in multi-state jurisdictions, what boundaries they should have, the measurement you use is an equidistant line between both countries. And if we were to follow that, we would have a line, we call it a median line as well. But if you were to follow that, you would have a line running between Trinidad and Tobago, and all that is south of the line will be Trinidad. The seas we are talking about, folks, and all that is north or northeast of that line will be Tobago. When you look at it that way, there are a lot of hydrocarbon resources north of the line, and that, of course, is one of the major reasons why a definition, as a maritime definition, is not given. And all that has been given to us now, Tobago that is, all that has been given is executive administrative control, not a boundary. But the central government is saying, we will let you administer 11 miles from the low water mark in Tobago, 11 miles outward. But all you have is an administrative function. You don't have ownership. You are doing this on behalf of the cabinet and the parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. So I was coming to the point where you have resources that are in Tobago waters. If you are going to determine how much Tobago contributes to the development of the country, you are going to have a lot of resources north of the median line. And you calculate what that contribution is to the national wealth overall. And you say Tobago, in addition to the 4.03, and it's the same thing for the Trinidad as well. In addition to that, you are going to have this part of the developmental funding in the budget. When we have worked it out, it's come up to about 32%, with the remaining, of course, being Trinidad's. So that is the explanation of the need for definition, which, as I said, has been removed. It was there before, right? It was an insufficient definition, but it was there before. Gentlemen?
So,
lady,
Dr. James.
There's a lady there as well, isn't there a lady?
Oh, she's not with us tonight. She's
Okay.
a little under the weather. But we have Tommy and we have Gary who is with us as well. And they can jump in however whenever they want to.
Anytime.
Another question from the chat, Dr. James, is a special majority needed in Parliament for Tobago to attain self-government?
Yes. In the House of Representatives, right, the way the Constitution is organized at the current time, you need a three-quarters majority in the lower house, and you need a 2/3 majority in the Senate.
Right. I think you already answered this question.
We have to know, once you're altering, you're seeking to alter the Constitution, those majorities come into play.
Another person that asks, how can Tobago contribute to the nation's GDP? I think you already answered that.
I think so too.
Yeah, you answered that. Now we have Albert Montano in Canada. He says, Dr. Winsford, does the THA ever audit the budget annually?
We know we have an office in the country called Auditor General.
Yeah.
Well, the THA has to have its accounts ready for the Auditor General to audit. So every year, the Auditor General's office has to audit the budget and the finances of the THA, how much money they have received, the revenues, and how much they have spent, and so on and so on. And the Auditor General has been less than, shall we say, less than positive about what has been happening in the way we spend money in the country, in the island. Yeah, it has been quite unflattering, his or her comments. So yes, every year that has to happen, but the actual results of the Auditor General take a little while to arrive. In respect of 2020, we have an overall report on the finances of the country. We haven't had, I think the last audit of the Tobago finances in terms of a report being published came in 2016. But the management is less than desirable, far less than is desirable.
So, Dr. James, do you agree with what was put on the table with regards to 15 seats? Are you in agreement with that?
Well, let's look at it. Now, let me answer your question up front and say no. Because
Why is that?
I can't see. Well, I'm assuming that the reason why the number is being expanded from 12 to 15 is that the government somehow believes that you will be able to avoid a tie. In other words, it's a tie that made them go that way in the first place. Good? But when you look at the arithmetic of 15, there was no guarantee that going to 15 seats will end a tie or break a tie whenever a tie occurs in the future, right? And it's not a simple question of multiplying the number of seats. You have to multiply or increase the number of seats in relation to what you want to see happen. Now, by the way, in the new proposals, it's not simply a movement from 12 to 15 seats. It's also giving the chief secretary and the minority leader the ability to appoint people to the House of Assembly. So you will have 15 elected assemblymen, and then you will have 10, if I remember right, 10 appointed councillors. Right? The majority, I think, will go to the government. So let's assume it's 3 going to the minority leader. The remaining 7 or 8 will go to the chief executive officer, the chief secretary, right? And that has all come about because of the tie. But there is no max that will deny, that will give us the ability to break a tie simply because we have moved to 15. I don't know if I got that out right enough. Did you follow me there?
Yeah, I follow you. So what do you think is the solution?
Oh, that's a big story, big story. I am thinking that this tie gives us the opportunity to come up with a design of the way we want ourselves to be governed in Tobago that the JSC does not refer to, deal with in any sense whatsoever. That is why the PNM keeps talking about the same movement from 12 to 15 seats and a bigger slice of the national budget. You don't hear them talking about how do we achieve representative governance in Tobago. And I'm saying the 6 points, the 6-6 tie gives us an opportunity to reform government in Tobago. And we are talking now of a bicameral state of affairs. We have the House of Assembly that is analogous to the House of Representatives in the country, and you also have a Senate. Now, this gives me the opportunity to say something that I'm sure none of you guys has thought of. And certainly PNM has not mentioned this at all. It's not where their head is, but I think it's going to be very interesting. And here it is. You're talking about equality of status in the preamble, but nowhere else in the documents do you develop, do you state, do you expand on the notion of equality of status. Nowhere else. It's just mentioned there, and you don't go on to fill it out. Now, here's where we come in, that is those of us who are suggesting changes to the Constitution. Here's where we come in. We say that at the level of the House of Representatives, Tobago cannot compete, cannot have equality with Trinidad. Why? Because Trinidad has 39 seats, that is at the current time, 39 seats in the House, and Tobago has 2. If you have one island having 39 and the other having 2, the island that has 2 cannot influence policy, cannot predictably influence policy because it just doesn't have enough seats. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So Tobago cannot have equality where representation in a national parliament is concerned. However, we have a Senate as well. And that Senate is totally appointed. The government has a majority. I think it's 16. The president has 9. That is 16 and 9 is what? 25?
Yeah, 25.
And then we have the opposition having 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that, but it's all appointed. We are saying it's at the level of the Senate that you can achieve equality of status. How so? By making that body entirely elected, right? But dividing the total number of representatives in that house by 2 and giving each island the same number of representatives.
But Dr. James, there's only 60,000 people in Tobago, and there is subtract 60,000 from 1.390. Why should Tobago have an equal amount of representatives when they only have 60,000 people?
Very good question, and that question comes up all the time. Because we are not using population. The moment you use population, there can be no equality of status, and we might as well end the conversation. But what that argument suggests is that because our numbers are so much smaller, right, we cannot have the same conditions as Trinidad. That's basically saying the smaller you are, the worse off you will be. You don't qualify. Now, if you, as I said, if you use that argument, the conversation should end. However, if you saw Tobago and Trinidad as separate islands with a separate kind of lifestyle, a separate culture, a separate ethnicity. In other words, if you saw Tobago as a special case, not to be compared with any district or municipality in Trinidad, right, for the reasons I've just given, right, then we ought to have equality at the level of the Senate. And this is not the first time that is happening around the world. Even in the Great America, we have had the smaller states having the same number of senators, right, in the Senate in America, in order to achieve that equality across states. If you went only by what the elections for the lower house, you would have a disproportional influence of the bigger states like California, for example. Yes? Smaller states like Delaware and Connecticut and Maine and so on don't stand a chance. But
they also have less electoral votes too, you know, the smaller states. They also have less electoral votes as well.
The equality in the American system is not in the House of Representatives. In fact, there is disproportional representation in the House. I'm saying that. Yes.
Okay.
That in our state of affairs, by the way, gentlemen, we have in the 39-2 something called proportional representation. That is to say, across the country, every representative has more or less the same number of electors, right, that they can have. And that is proportional representation. When I talk about the Senate and I am equaling the votes for each island based on the notion that they are separate islands, right? Trinidad and Tobago, separate islands. When I do that, I am trying to achieve equality in a unitary state, because I believe that you have to have that equality. And at the level of the Senate is where we are going to have something called disproportionate representation. Disproportionate because of the very argument that your question contains. We don't begin to have a population in Tobago that is as large as that of Trinidad. And that makes it disproportionate. We equalize the two islands, the status of the two islands at the level of the Senate, because we can't do it in the House of Representatives. Does that response make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Gary,
well,
and
what I'm saying, if you don't have
I agree.
like that, huh?
No, Tommy is saying he agree. Tommy is saying, the other one of our co-hosts is saying he agree with you. I agree.
Yeah, because you still have to, the government does not tackle the question. You still have to ask yourself, how can we have equality of status? I am offering, and this is not a thought that originated with me, but it is something that I have assisted in developing. Yeah. If you don't have equality, where are you going to have the equality in this country? You follow?
Yeah.
Why?
So this falls under constitutional reform, then, basically.
Well, that is what they are doing. Whenever you try to change the constitution, amend it, that is constitutional reform. But I suppose you are talking about wholesale. But you don't need to go wholesale to change the way the Senate works. In other words, you don't have to have all out amendment of the Constitution. We are saying make, and I don't have all the technical details. Those things can be worked out by a draftsman that is appropriately trained in constitutional lawmaking and so on. But I am certain that it's the best answer that is available at the current time. Now, if you gentlemen are aware of any other idea or perspective that would bring equality of status to Trinidad on the one hand and Tobago on the other hand, let me know.
Yeah, we will definitely let you know, because if we try to let the PNM know, they will if we try.
Well, you know that we live in this country and we have to manage it. You remember when Tobago was a separate colony, right?
Yeah, we're back when.
Before the 1880s, right? But of course, we were not in charge. The British were in charge, right? You know that. We have an opportunity now for our children. We have an opportunity to govern ourselves as different islands for the betterment of the whole. One of the points that comes out strongly in the new bills is that everything in the new proposals, right, every right or every power they have given to Tobago, right, is to be interpreted in relation to cabinet dominance. Cabinet can determine that it's not going that way. If Tobago wants to go away, cabinet can say, no, we are going to veto this. We're going to turn you guys around. That is not equality of status. That is not self-determination. That is still the 39-2 working. You want a situation where each island sits down and says, this is the way we want to run our affairs. Tobago has never had that. It has always been dominated by the cabinet, which comes out of the results of the elections of our 41 constituencies in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a built-in inequality there, which we have to accept because of the notion of proportional representation. But we do want to have a different state of affairs in the Senate, and that is where we can achieve, if there's nothing else you got from my conversation with you gentlemen, as a new idea that is, but I'm sure you got other things, it is that I am proposing that the Senate be the place where the islands are on the same footing. As I said, except you have a superior idea.
So, Dr. James, I want you to take a quick listen to 𝗪𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗽 and what she had to say.
Tobagonians do not want secession. That's the message from Member of Parliament for Tobago West and member of the Joint Select Committee on Self-Government for Tobago, 𝗪𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗽. She says the committee's investigation did not reveal any desire by Tobagonians to break the unitary nature of the state of TNT. Ms. 𝗪𝗃𝗃𝗽 says from as far back as 1977, when Tobago East Member of Parliament A.N.R. Robinson began the debate, key in many discussions is what Tobago really wants.
Yes, we want internal self-government, but we want to also maintain the unitary state. And I think that some people are shifting their positions as it relates to what is the definition of internal self-government, because we have some people in Tobago and in Trinidad also who are foisting on Tobagonians that internal self-government means secession. When we consulted Tobagonians, we did not speak to secession. The people of Tobago said that they did not want secession.
Minister 𝗪𝗃𝗃𝗽 says that there was talk of federalism or government in which powers are divided between two levels of government of equal status. This, however, she says, would require a marshalling of economic, social, and other forces in Tobago.
And we have to build our capacity as we move closer and closer to that. So, for instance, we have to build our infrastructure. We have to build, as we speak to monetizing the resources in the sea, as we speak about. Yeah, to building our technical capacity and our human resources and so on, so we can really get to the point of that level of self-government.
What do you say, Dr. James?
Very interesting, but predictable. So let's go. She's saying
predictable. You say predictable, right?
Yes, because these are arguments that PNM has advanced over the years. It's nothing strange. Every time we talk about greater autonomy and self-determination, they talk secession all the time. And it's always they who are bringing it up. When you listen to people talking to Tobago, they don't talk about secession except as an academic option. They talk about having more powers to manage their own affairs. That doesn't mean breaking away from. To call for more powers to manage yourself is not synonymous with wanting to break away. But that is the way the PNM has interpreted that. And I'm telling you now, I am one of those guys who see secession as the ultimate solution. Way down the way. We only raise it because we are referring to the government's continuing refusal to grant us the greater autonomy that we seek. So people have not been pushing. Nobody has gone on any platform and they have argued for secession. You will not hear that. There is no evidence that anybody has gone on a platform and pushed something called secession. That's one thing. The second thing is that she says that people don't want to keep the unitary state. The PNM would like to keep the unity. By the way, Rowley has been heard saying that he has no problem with federalism, 2 states and 1 overall government. He said that. Anyhow, I just remember that, so I went back to it. But she talked about the unitary state. Do you know that that term is a political term? It doesn't figure anywhere in our Constitution or in the House of Assembly Act. It's not there. It is a political construct that came up over time, and people have used it. But I imagine unitary state means that Trinidad and Tobago will be one. The question is, in what ways will the 2 islands be one? Do we continue to be one in the way that we are now, or do we continue to be one, but different, different arrangements in each island? Now, the way we are is that we are run by cabinet government, with Trinidad dominating everything, with the cabinet dominating everything, with the cabinet telling us what to do, with the cabinet making all the laws, with the cabinet saying we make laws and we're going to give you some to administrate. Now, you gentlemen will know that I am not speaking inaccuracies here. It's the way we have been governed. The Secretary for Finance, Mr. Jack, with whom you started off, says, well, look, let us prepare a House of Assembly budget and take it to Mr. 𝗪𝗏𝗵𝗏. And what does he do? He makes what people have called a wish list, a big budget, and knowing full well, and when he goes to Mr. 𝗪𝗏𝗏, that budget would be cut down considerably. So in other words, the unitary state that we advance right now, that we follow, is a state in which the government of Trinidad and Tobago decides. And the government, of course, as I said, is dominated by the Trinidadian voice, the Trinidadian policymaker. The government decides that this is what Tobago should have. Yes? Until, of course, there was this Dispute Resolution Commission that granted the 4.02 on the basis of head of population. Right? So when Ms. Cudjoe says that we are pushing against the unitary state, she must explain what is her concept of the unitary state. The unitary state, as people speak about it, the way it is organized now, is not the only way it can be organized. You can follow my proposals and still keep your unitary state, right? But it's just that the boundaries of the island must be defined so that we will know for sure how much we are contributing to the development of the country, right? Apart from, of course, contributing on the basis of per capita of population. Yes, I think that is in essence what she has said. If I have missed anything, remind me and I will speak to it.
No, you're good, man. You're very good. So what we want to do, Dr. James, there's one or two questions here in the chat. Someone says the UNC and ANR had a special majority. Why did they not fix the problem?
A very good question. And I have asked myself that same question. Why didn't they fix it? Maybe there was internal wrangling between the UNC on the one hand, the DSC on the other, and the other parties that made up the... You're talking when we had 33, right? Is that what?
Yeah.
Right. And of course, the ONR and so on. ONR was there with a number of seats, the UNC, the DSC in Tobago and so on. So, they didn't fix it. And Robinson particularly, because he was prime minister, right? He didn't fix it. In fact, when he gave the government to the UNC, you remember what he said? He said he did not make any special deals for Tobago. So that is a blot on Robinson's political book. Yeah, it's a blot on his book, his copybook, as you say. So that's the way I would answer that, because he could have tried it, but he didn't. Maybe his experience of it from 28, he became in 1980 the first chairman, and he probably had some experiences that probably showed him that he could not. Remember, Robinson got booted out of power. You remember that with the coup in 1990 and so on?
Yeah.
And when he instituted some rigorous measures to control expenditure and so on, what happened? He became hated, and then 𝗪𝗏𝘁𝗀𝗽 took advantage of the climate, then the political climate, and sought to overthrow the government.
But Dr. James,
I can't defend Robinson there.
Tommy, if you can, we have to go for a quick break to the top of the hour. I'm just going to go for a quick station identity, and we're going to come right back with your question. I'm going to do the station identity right now. So Dr. James, just stick with us for a minute. We're going to go for a quick station identification, and then we'll be right back. It's in the village with the dark triplets on WZYE 95.9 FM. We're going to go for a quick station identification, and we'll be right back after this station identification.
You're listening to WZYE 95.9 FM. You are listening to WZYE LP 95.9 FM, the most influential name in Caribbean radio in the tri-state area. Broadcasting from East Orange, New Jersey, the most influential name in Caribbean radio. WZYE 95.9 FM.
And of course, we are back with you. It's in the village with the 𝗪𝗶𝗹𝗵𝗏 on WZYE 95.9 FM. We have with us Dr. Winford James, and he's enlightening us about the goings on in Tobago. So, Tommy, go ahead with your question.
Yes, Dr. James. I'm asking: is it not true that Robinson had to make the moves he made based on his involvement with the World Bank and the IMF?
I believe so, yes. This is memory now talking, but yes. But what I'm saying is that whatever moves he made, when he took away cola and all that sort of thing, right? And I think he cut salaries as well. He offended the public service, the teaching service. And you know the power of those two services, right? He offended them, and they took retaliatory action against him. The marches and so on, and then of course he lost the election the next time around. So yes, there were certain demands that were made by the IMF and the World Bank, which he had to agree to, but which he could not convince the population that was the way to go. Right now, for example, Dr. 𝗪𝗶𝘃𝗀𝗃 doesn't want to go to the World Bank or the IMF at all. In fact, he says he prefers to go to borrow money from China.
Correct.
And somebody, I don't think it's he who said this, but somebody said he prefers to even take the loan from China at double the rate than to go to the
almost double the rate, yes.
And the World Bank. So I'm just saying here, Dr. 𝗪𝗃𝗃𝗏 remembers the history at least in part, and he doesn't want to risk the wrath of the public service and the teaching service if you were to go that way, because there would be a lot of retrenchment. As one of the consequences of going the IMF route. There'll be a lot of downsizing, and some people would say right-sizing of employment in different public sectors, right? And that would have spin-off effects on the private sector. So there would be some, before this society, the economy, as we say, catches itself, there will be some disarray, and there'll be a political price to pay.
Dr. James, I want to say, one quick minute, Tommy. I teach global business, and to me, not going to the IMF I agree with that, because I think the IMF have a one-size-fits-all policy for all these different countries, and they may come in with a policy that's not the right policy for Trinidad and Tobago. Right. But also when we're looking at today, it seems like if the IMF is in Trinidad because 30,000 CPEP workers got cut in salary, 450 workers from Cal going home.
Right.
NGC lost $2.1 billion. Right. Every day seem to be austerity measures, but those austerity measures are being implemented by the government instead of the IMF telling them, we want you to implement these measures.
Well, except that just one little departure from what you've just said. And that is, there is a blame that COVID-19 must take, and a blame of policies that the government has come up with in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. When the government shuts down the borders and hardly allows trade between itself and other countries, especially the CARICOM countries, we cannot forget that the government is saying, and we know, that it has taken those measures because of the rise in infections and the rise in the number of deaths. Things are slowing down now, but what I'm saying is not simply policies that the government has taken in normal time. These are policies the government has taken in unusual time. But I take the point that it's better for us to treat our own infections and disease, economically speaking, than to have the IMF force us to do it. But it takes fiscal discipline, and it takes political cooperation. And these days we are not so sure where those two things are sitting. We really don't know. People's loyalties are changing. There are a lot of people who are suffering very badly because of the measures the government has taken as inspired by the COVID pandemic. You know that. A lot of people have been retrenched. Small businesses, medium-sized businesses have suffered badly, have gone out of business irrecoverably, some people say. Yeah? In other words, people have to want to look for somebody to blame. Somebody to blame. And soon Labour is going to find out, if it hasn't found out yet, that all those historical demands, all those demands that are waiting to be satisfied, won't be satisfied given what has happened to the economy since when? Is it 2019? Late 2019? All of 2020? All of 2021 so far? I am supporting no one here. I'm merely pointing out that there is a price to pay. Some people don't agree with all the measures taken. A roti shop that has to change. I never had crowds. The people working there and the customers who used to patronize are not going to be happy. You follow what I'm saying? And there are a number of I could get when I get started on this. I do not want to stop in it, but you guys had better intervene in this sense. But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yes, the idea of our drinking our own medicine, or treating our own diseases, our own wounds, is always a superior idea, right? But sometimes you might reach a stage, and where there are other players in the market, China being one of them, where you might reach a stage where you might have to say, well, boy, watermelon flour, now we have to go to the IMF. But this is not something I'm recommending.
Right.
I know how to make sacrifice in my own personal life. I know how to cut corners. Right? I learned that as a boy growing up. You follow?
Echo from you.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Doc. I was concerned about the property tax issue and whether that should be revisited anytime soon.
No doubt about that. But the government did not take the opportunity in 2019 to do so. 2019, 2018. You know, they had a lot of support, at that time, but they thought it was a political risk. Or imagine the risk now where so many people cannot pay their rent, when so many people cannot meet their loans, their loan obligations. How are they going to pay? If you were to do it in 2021, the political cost, wouldn't they be greater? You think the government might have to confiscate people's properties? What I'm saying here is that it is extremely difficult to institute something like that in a year when the pandemic has caused so much damage to the economy.
I think it's the objective for the government to confiscate people's properties. That is the objective.
You feel so? Or what would be the advantage to them? Because that would cause more outrage, more suffering, more disfavor, more dissension, greater unhappiness. But there's no advantage to the government to do so. So the better thing is to leave.
I don't see this government as concerned about people's happiness. The way this government has treated our people by locking them out of the country, and I've seen consideration and disrespect from with 100 miles. There's no respect here. There's no concern about citizen survival. They don't care who they hurt. They don't care who died. They don't care.
So those are political
if your family is in
issues,
the hospital and you're trying to get home, they don't have no remorse for that, no concern at all.
And the question is, how sizable is the constituency that is represented by those ideas? Because those ideas have a constituency. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think you're onto something very good there. How many people have become disaffected with the PNM?
But Dr. James, I want to say this, sir. I believe this government, and by the way, Dr. James, I'm a supporter of the People's National Movement, but I'm not a blind supporter.
I'm speaking, right?
Yeah, Ansem. I'm not a blind supporter.
I think you have boasted about that before, Ansem.
Listen to this, but I'm not a blind supporter, right? And I have to say, Dr. James, that the things that this government have done during this pandemic and started in 2019 is somewhat wicked and evil. And here's why I say that. Okay. The reason why I say that is that in a pandemic, when 30,000 workers who are making $700 a fortnight to put food on the table and shelter over their head.
Right.
And you are going to take away that money and tell them we're going to give you a grant. When WASA in a pandemic can go and cut off people water when you need to wash your hands in a pandemic, right? When you are going to put on the table that you want to reduce pension, what I mean reduce, you want to take it from 60 to 65. These are elderly people.
Yes.
In addition, when elderly people have to stand out in the rain to go get a vaccine and you didn't put things in place, again, you put an alphabet system in place that was a disaster for people in the country, and quickly you had to change it. You put another exemption policy in the place, which was a disaster that you had to go and change. These things are wicked and evil.
And yet you support them.
Well, listen, Dr. James, I don't support the wicked and evil policies.
No, but you will vote for them, right?
Well, it's 2021.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I've heard people like you talk, and they have turned around and put back the same government in power, same party in power.
Well, listen, let me say this. I'm going to say this tonight, Dr. James.
Yes.
If Dr. Rowley is the leader of the People's National Movement in 2025, I will not vote for the PNM.
Okay. So, but he says he's not coming back in.
Yeah, to be decided. You remember?
No, he said that.
No, but listen.
To be decided, he has already.
Yeah, Petrotrin is not going to be closed down either.
Right.
We're not closing down Petrotrin. Right?
Well, okay, he can change his mind. Okay.
But let me tell you something, Dr. James.
We're not closing down Petrotrin. Don't forget that, you know.
No, I don't forget that.
Read my lips. And if you go to the refrigerator, right? I'm not waiting for you to come back from the refrigerator. We are not closing down Petrotrin. There we go. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah,
yes,
you were right. Dr. Rowley administration was a pandemic that hit Trinidad and Tobago before 2019. And you would be able to analyze and see the destruction that took place of our people economically from 2016 onward. When he took office, there was destruction upon destruction and chaos upon chaos and mismanagement upon mismanagement without any regards who they set hungry or homeless within the country. I mean, this is what we saw taking place.
Yeah.
And the kind of level of inconsideration I saw with Dr. Rowley and his administration towards our people by locking them out, and I contacted the government trying to relay what was taking place there. You can tell them who dying, who trapped in between transit, any citizen in emergency, it didn't faze them at all. Nothing that you reached out to them and tried to reason with them that the level of distress was taking place with our citizens outside the country, they couldn't care less.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's a good idea to characterize any government as wicked. They have very poor and ineffective policies, but I don't know about wickedness. Wickedness for me is a spiritual thing.
But Dr. James, after telling this, I looked up the meaning of wicked. Right? And based on the meaning of wicked, this government is wicked and evil. And as a matter of fact, in the meaning of wicked is evil. You know, I'm a professor too, right?
Yeah.
So I don't just throw around words lightly.
Yeah. But
based on the meaning of wicked.
You have to be careful. In what
sense that's okay.
Is the government evil? In what sense? Evil, and who benefits from being evil? There must be some beneficiary of the evil. Well, you know, when I listen to you guys talk, I'm thinking about the effect on the PNM's constituency. There are people who have become disaffected. There are some people who remain, the sycophants and the diehards will remain, but that constituency is only kept alive, and if it increases, it only grows to the extent that people do not want the opposition to be in charge. And it reduces to a contest between the two ethnicities or the two races. So I'm just saying here, there are people who will not vote the PNM and allow the UNC to win, because the UNC has more drive to win than the PNM has in maintaining power. because there's a certain self-righteousness that the PNM brings to. If you listen to Dr. Rowley talk, it's he alone that is right. Everything the opposition says is wrong. You know, he does not even come across as somebody who has given the thing thought and, you know, is prepared to enlighten the country by rebutting systematically what the opposition is coming up with. So I am thinking that the PNM runs the risk of getting some big dents in its support, its traditional support base. And that is going to be a tremendous thing in the next elections. From what I'm hearing, there are people who have not recovered. In fact, I understand there are people who are dying because of poverty. You guys heard about that?
Yeah, of course,
They're dying because they cannot see about their health properly.
Well, we appreciate getting that feedback from you, who is physically there.
Well, I don't belong to any of the parties, and I am an independent commentator. I guard my independence jealously. You follow what I'm saying? But I can read the play and say, well.
So, Dr. James, you don't support any party in Tobago?
No, I mean, I don't vote in Tobago. But if the question you're asking is, if I were to choose between the two, which would I choose? I can unhesitatingly say the PDP. I don't know if that answers your question, but
that answers my question. That answers the question.
Yeah, but I'm not a member of the PDP. I think the PDP is more progressive, listens to ideas in a way that the PNM does not. The PNM has a culture within which its members are bound, and it's very difficult to reach them, to change their ways. The people in Tobago, for example, take their orders, or so it appears, from those in Port of Spain. Yeah? And that's part of the dominance of the PNM over Tobago. So I'm just saying here, I am free to see things as I think they are. One of my former students recently, in a text message, he said, what do you think about Rowley? He's not. You don't find him ridiculous? He fooled me, but I voted for him, but it's not going to happen again, And she was quite unhappy at the way he was prioritizing in this period of pandemic, I'm just saying that the PNM will lose some of its constituents. How big a slice of the constituents, I don't know at this time. But there's a lot of heartache and a lot of despair and frustration and nowhere to turn. There's a lot of that going on. And even though the government has come up with the grants, the various grants and so on, how those grants are administrated cause prejudice in the distribution and so on. Some people don't get it, There are other people who get it and others don't. And that causes a certain amount of bitterness in people who have traditionally supported the PNM, right? Now, of course, they have to go to the HCF to pay people, to pay salaries. That is not sustainable, as you know, right? So if we don't open our borders, Jamaica, as you know, has opened its borders.
Correct,
And its tourism industry did very well in 2020, as you have read, right?
Angola too. Angola doing very good with tourism.
And they have not, by the way, the Jamaican, they haven't lost significantly more people than Trinidad. And they haven't had significantly more infections. You follow what I'm trying to say here? And you close down your borders, right? With minor exceptions and so on. I am not saying that there might be not some benefit or some saving grace to what the government is doing. But sometimes you wonder about some of the measures that they have taken, right? And more to the point, there are many people out there who are not quite convinced, who do not think that it's merely driven by a need to save people's lives and reduce the number of infections. They see some other factors involved, rightly or wrongly. And I think the PNM is at risk of losing.
There's an underlying strategy behind what they're doing, it seems to me.
And what is it? As you see, what is that strategy?
There's an underlying plan. There's a hidden agenda behind the scenes of what they're really doing.
Oh, you mean, but you don't know what it is?
I don't know what it is, but there seems to be a direct plan. If you notice, they're crippling people's ability to sustain themselves. You know, so you have to really, you know, there's some agenda, to, you know, to really, you know, to take over some people's economic situation. You know, but it's.
So you think that what they're doing is to their own advantage then?
There is an agenda. I think that's an agenda, and I think Xiao Chong have a lot to do with it. and I'm calling him Bud, but then he's what I'm saying to you. But you know, you take away a man's food, and then you take away his ability to support himself, and then you put him in prison. You make him a desperate man, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
you remember the article emergency? Remember the article emergency under the former government and what that caused, right?
They're breaking your morality. You know, they're breaking the you know, that's why they throw in prison, right? And they limit what you can and cannot have.
And they will support you.
You know, I mean, let's look and see what the government is doing. But
break a man's spirit. Break a man's spirit and he'll support you.
Yeah. Listen, that is true, though. Listen, but listen. When Judge Volney was here with us, he says the ants. Once the ants come down from the hill, it's a whole family of ants, and you cannot stop those ants when they come down from the hill. And that's what's going on in Trinidad now. The ants are coming down from the hills, and it might be difficult to stop them when they come down.
What are they coming down from the hills to do?
They're hungry.
Oh, you mean they're coming for sustenance?
Yeah, they're coming to get something. They're hungry. Right. These are hungry ants.
Which means that those of us who feel we are sitting safe will be affected.
Of course. Of course.
So social unrest.
Of course. The ants hungry. And you can't stop those ants when they come down from the hill. But let me add just one thing quick, Dr. James. The person who talked to you about Dr. Rowley and said they were very disappointed.
Yes.
Right? I fall into that category too as well. And here's why. I am one of the persons here in the diaspora who hosted Dr. Rowley twice at my house when he was in opposition. Wow. Twice. Wow. I hosted Dr. Rowley twice in opposition. He was not, and he was the opposition leader of the PNM. And the culminating activities used to happen at my house. I took Dr. Rowley to the New York Stock Exchange. For the first time. He has never been to something like that, the New York Stock Exchange. I worked at the New York Stock Exchange for 23 years. Wow. I took him and his entourage to the New York Stock Exchange. And today, I can say, just as that person told you, I am very, very disappointed in Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. And the reason why I'm disappointed, I'm going to close with this, on this one. There are two things that I request of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I am from 𝗪𝗏𝗃, and in 𝗪𝗏𝗃, there's been an abandoned building sitting since 2011. And there are 3 other buildings that have been unpainted for a decade and a half. I requested from the government for them to either demolish the abandoned building or renovate it for 𝗪𝗏𝗃. And the second thing I requested was the Workers' Bank building on Duncan Street to establish the 𝗪𝗵𝗃 to Wall Street Empowerment Center.
I hear you.
And I felt the things that I did when Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley was in opposition, and the things that I showed him, he was an abysmal disappointment for the people of 𝗪𝗵𝗃 and the things that I wanted to accomplish. That's why I can sit here today and say I'm totally disappointed in him. And the PNM doesn't really care about the people of 𝗪𝗵𝗃 and environs. I can say that because of the facts. I don't like to make stuff up. This is factual stuff. But I just have to throw that in. But quickly, Dr. James, let me just read some things here from the chat. Somebody said, thank you, Dr. James. Something that has been telling him. When you tell me about the PNM and I was still vote for the PNM, somebody in the chat said the same thing about me. Somebody else says Dr. Rowley is not coming back for another term. And Another person says, yes, Mr. James, but the economy was falling apart before COVID. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that too. But
okay.
It was better. It was easier to manage then. What COVID-19 has done is to exacerbate the situation very badly. You see, the economy is not far from being wrecked, you know. Our income as a country has declined considerably, you know. Right? As I said, some businesses are falling apart and they can hardly recover, yeah? And lots of people have become out of jobs and have had to, they're out of desperation. They have to take low-paying jobs and which themselves are not sustainable. And the state cannot employ everybody. Of course, the PNM revels in employing people because they create vote banks in that process. But it's going to be difficult to sustain it. And when people become as disappointed as you are, but lack your education, they are going to seek revenge in other ways. You know that, right? You can use your education and moderate your emotions. Yes,
I have a recommendation. You know, it's a common sense recommendation that I would like to make. It's a simple thing. We have the resources to invest in mass production of food in the country. We have the ability to do that, but the government has not done so. Has not done so. I mean, I looked at simple things as when things were tough with my parents and my dad was a little bit out of work. We planned stuff around the house and tried to, you know, subsidize that income. The thing about it is that the government has not shown and wasted and worked against the agricultural industry. That is what I have seen. We could have been in a better situation if we had worked with the agricultural industry. You see, if our people have food, you might not have 10 suit of clothes, but if you have food and you have shelter over your head, this is the most important thing in sustaining yourself. So we should at least have the ability to feed our people. And that is why I said so negligence.
Right. Although we still feed a lot of people, we still have a lot of food in this country, on the table. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the great things about this country. We have more food than we produce. We have more food. But its trade with CARICOM has suffered badly for all kinds of reasons because, of course, rooted in the pandemic. It's not good. It's not good. It's how the politicians persuade the people to stay with them. How are they going to do that? I'm going to be watching for that. How do they persuade people to continue to support them, given what they have presided over?
Dr. James, another person says quickly three other things. I like to get these people. Someone said judgment was given by the Privy Council that the government can't touch salaries in the matter that was awarded to Candy Chin-Choi by the Privy Council. I don't know if you know about that. Someone also said right, the UNC took the government to court on property tax issue and it's still a court matter. Let me see. Another person says God wicked also.
God what?
Wicked also. Hold on. God wicked also. He flood the whole world and releases the devil on the earth. Another person says that.
Very interesting comment.
Yeah, another person says, who the PNM or the New World Order? Somebody else says, Dr. James, if you want to pitch with 12 marbles and you lost 6 out of 12, who was the winner? That is a fellow we have in the chat here called Ulrich, Dr. James. Yes. Ulrich does come up with these type of things, you know. So who's the winner, Dr. James?
I don't understand the mathematics there.
I don't understand the mathematics myself. He also said to me,
there's some algebraic notion there that has eluded me.
But Dr. James,
I think he's referring to the Tobago election answer.
Yeah, the Tobago election. Yeah. He's referring to the Tobago election.
I know that, but how do you answer a question like that?
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at the situation because there's a holdover executive. People think that there's a greater six than the other six.
Yeah.
But both sixes should have the same equality. But you don't get that impression. from the holdover party.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a bad situation. I want to tell you guys. That could be a very explosive issue, because these fellas are running the show without any opposition in the House. In fact, there is no presiding officer in the House right now. All kinds of things are happening. It's not good for democracy. And I think people are not going to stand for it, even people on the PNM side.
Well, what I see happening is I think the government is working the grounds to destroy the opportunity of the PDP in making any kind of further progress.
Some people think so. Some people think
that's what I think taking place. And if they have to frame what's new, or they have to make some kind of mischief with the destiny just before the election is called to derail the votes, they will do everything in that aspect, and that's what I think we have to watch for.
But remember that the PDP is not a bunch of bricks on boards that you break. They have life and energy as well. They can answer back.
Yeah, and they have some intelligent people.
Oh, and they can answer back.
Yeah, they have intelligent people.
Remember, to get to 6 seats, it wasn't an easy task. People who have seen the light, they have seen that they can dislodge the PNM, and they are still living in that hope. You follow what I'm trying to say here? So it's not as if it's PNM is going to have a walkover, but they're going to try.
Dr. James, Kathy says, I'm a Tobagonian and things are rough to survive.
Yes, I imagine. So she means job-wise and so on.
Well, just to survive, I guess. You know what I mean?
But how do you survive without a job?
Yeah, that's true too. Well,
can she go to the supermarket and buy what she wants? Can she go to the other groceries and get what she wants?
Yeah.
The boats, of course, still operate not at the same schedule as before.
And you can't sell nothing on the side of the street. You can't sell.
Well, the groceries
can sell some bakery.
The groceries can do that. They interpret the protocols to allow them to sell those things.
Someone also said, no, Mr. James, no, Dr. James, COVID only give them excuses.
Okay.
Another person says, Dr. Winford James, do you believe that Tobago is in good financial situation now?
No, not at all. Far from it. That's a whole conversation by itself. Oh, that's no, there's a lot to say about that. That's a conversation by itself.
Kathy J. from Tobago says, as a self-employed person, I never thought in my life I will have to reach this state. My bank account reading minus $2.27.
Wow. And now she has to go depend on other people who could take advantage of her, right?
Yeah, and Dr. James, wicked and evil policies cause that.
Yeah, well, as I said, that sounds like a biblical kind of approach. I don't have much faith in the conventional, canonical, biblical approach.
Okay, that's all right. Okay.
Yeah, you follow? No.
Yeah.
Use all these things that are happening have happened in the world, and worse have happened in the world. We know that, right?
Correct is right.
Across history, far worse things have occurred. Yeah, but it's not. And there are some men who are evil because the more power they have, the more control they have over the citizenry. The more they abuse that control, right? Now, we don't want to get back to that stage, those stages of history where you had absolute rulers who, of course, have trampled the people and abused their power, right? We don't really want to go there. And that is why democracy remains the option to push back against would-be dictators, even though they don't even see it in themselves. Would-be dictators, which push back against impositions from outside. Push back against people who hold dominion over you when they really should not. I understand. And how do you get your people to resist this the same way that you have looked at it through your mind, and you have analyzed and you have synthesized and so on, and you're saying we want a Tobago over which we manage. Or if we make our mistake, we make our mistake. But we must manage. We must determine the laws by which we govern. We must develop a concept of representative democracy, right? But the people are the powerful force. You follow? But that's another story. How do you design a system of governance in Tobago? We're not talking about the existing ones. We're not talking about a system dominated by the cabinet, which it is now. We're not talking about those things. We're talking about true self-determination. We have hardly had the chance to talk about that aspect of the preamble. We have talked about the equality of status, and I hope you guys remember what I have said. Even though you may not agree with it, see if you can find people who can improve on that idea. And as soon as you find that, let me know, please.
Yeah, we let you know. Another person said race, Mr. James, that's why. Another person says
race.
The person says race, Mr. James, that's why. I don't know.
Yeah. That is Seven Ryan's thesis.
Yeah.
Seven Ryan's thesis.
Tommy, again, feedback from you.
You can.
Tommy, again, feedback.
You shouldn't be. But Dr. James, I wanted to ask about this. I have some different thoughts as far as solutions, real solutions. And I think real solutions for the Caribbean, for Trinidad and Tobago, lies in a Caribbean solution. As a matter of fact, I think that we're going to be able to eliminate the kings on the hill who could become dictators once we can reunite the entire Caribbean and have an overarching system that will help to put us in a better state. What's your thought?
That was the idea of the Federation, don't forget, 1958, the Federation, right? And you know how it broke up and so on. Sovereignty, once you get accustomed to it, it's hard to give up. And each island would be required to give up their sovereignty. It hasn't happened in the modern world, you know. In fact, what has happened across continents is that economic union has prevailed over political union. So you form trade blocks, and if you're big enough, you control trade to the extent that you can. So you have the European Union, right? That's an economic thing. You have the union in some of the Asian countries. I forgot the name that they go by now. The Africans are also trying, right? And I understand that there is a concept now, instead of Pan-Africanism, there's a concept of global Africa, right? And this Professor 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗏 was pushing that recently in a brilliant lecture that I heard. So we have CARICOM. And CARICOM, once you join it with the concept of, what do you call that, CSME, what do you call that again? With the CSME, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Movements of goods and people across the Caribbean. You can go to work in any Caribbean island, you know, that kind of way. Certainly. There is an attempt to create an economic union in the Caribbean via CARICOM. So yes, I'm in favor of all of that, but the political union is hell. It's difficult to get that going. I don't know of any new political unions that have taken place over the last, century or so. Or probably less than that.
Of course, the CM is the Caribbean single market economy.
That is what I was trying to remember. Single market economy.
Yeah.
So
Ulrich says, Dr. Rowley said bananas are for monkeys, and then he tell us to eat one banana.
Oh, he did? He said bananas for monkeys. Don't tell us.
Yeah, he did say that. I did tell her to eat one banana. Yeah.
I think he came up with bananas when he was a little boy.
I might be a monkey because I don't eat 3 bananas a day.
Well, I just eat 2 bananas every morning in my smoothie. Ulrich says, I had 2 susuhan to get the same week Rowley shut down the country. So you know what? I have to call that money dead. JB Harper says, Dr. Williams, try a federation and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Also, Ulrich says, Dr. James, if you can have a word with Dr. Rowley, what would you say to him?
I would say learn how to temper your speeches and your conversation.
Oh my, Dr. James, I don't mean to cut you off. If I have had the same opportunity that I had in the past, I will tell him the same thing. Because, before when we used to speak, I used to tell him, let me bring you into my global business class. or let me bring you into my principles of business management class, right? Or let me bring you into my organizational behavior class. And this is what I will give to you, right? And that is so important, so important. So go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that was a good question always.
Yes, learn to temper your speeches too and your conversations with the people. Yes, learn to be less insultive. Learn to be more dispassionate. Learn to focus on enlightening people, especially your perceived enemies. Teach the nation. Take the opportunity every time to show the nation that this is the right way to go, and don't let yourself become overcome by emotions or by political adversariness, political behavior in the face of pressure or people who disagree with you. Yes? Take the higher ground. You are the leader of the country. You are leader of all the country, including the opposition forces. You are the leader. So I would say temper your outreach to the public, what you say, and of course, if you make mistakes, freely admit, and then get up and go again. That's what I would say. Many things to say, but that would be the main thing, I think. Would he listen to me? I don't think so.
I think you're absolutely right.
Dr. James, right, Dr. James, I think you see the comment to though. Ulrich asked, do you think he will take your advice? And you answered the question before he even asked you.
I am not on YouTube, you know.
But Dr. James, don't worry. We will put out something a message to Dr. 𝗪𝗏𝗃 from Dr. Winford James. Don't worry, we'll put out something like yeah, but again, Dr. James, we wanna thank you. And listen, we actually want to have you back because this was such an informative discussion about Tobago. But before you go,
yes,
if you had to give an opinion on the upcoming election, do you think the PDP will outlast the PNM?
I will say they have the basis to do so. It depends on how well they prosecute that base, how well they use the opportunities that are so plenteous, given the missteps, in my judgment, that the PNM has been making. Yes? Mm-hmm. If they manage the opportunities well enough, they should, to use your verb, they should outlast the PNM.
Okay.
Of course, these things will not be easier.
Somebody says, Dr. James, so much for reading. I don't understand what 𝗪𝗶𝗹𝗵𝗏 does be talking about sometime, you know. I think he does do extempo, you know. Maybe it's a double entendre.
What did JB say?
JB says, Dr. James, so much for reading. I don't know. I don't know what that means.
JB is not the former 100-meter specialist.
No, not that JB. I know that JB very well.
That's probably JC.
No, this one is 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Oh, no, maybe it's a different guy. Yeah,
he's a different guy. I know that JB because you know he's a runner too.
Let's put it this way: I don't offer, nor do I take readings.
Okay. And Ulrich says he agrees with you on the statement you make with respect to Dr. Rowley.
Okay.
Right? So, Tommy, you have any other questions for Dr. James?
Dr. James has done a fabulous job tonight for us. And I really appreciate everything that he has said. And I hope that he keeps speaking truth to power. That's what we love here in the village.
Dr. James is a soldier, man. Dr. James is a soldier. Right? And you know Dr. James is my friend on Facebook, you know. But Dr. James, you know they put us on Facebook. You know we in Facebook jail, you know. Somebody report us. I don't know what they report us for, but let me say this finally before you go. And maybe you can help me with this. We have invited several members of the PNM to come on the program. And so far, we like the West Indies, we're making plenty ducks. Plenty ducks. We getting ball out in the first ball in the over. Nobody have accepted to come on the program yet. I don't know why, but.
Well, I'm accustomed to that as well. There is a group in Tobago called CivilNet, Tobago CivilNet.
Mm-hmm.
And that group has been trying to get them to participate in some of the discussions, and they have religiously stayed away.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that to hit the PNM. I'm saying that as a matter of course. That's the record.
No, it's facts. It's facts.
The PNM, the PDP has come and has accepted the invitation to participate.
PDP has come here too as well. The PDP has come. UNC has come.
Maybe they don't see the need to participate, but it's a fact that they are not as accommodating as you would expect them to be.
Mm.
Governance is a public thing, you know. Governance is a privilege, or ought to be. It's not your own personal fiefdom that you can rule as you like. That's not what we want. Yes, you are a servant of the people. You are elected to serve. And you've got to listen to everybody. You have to defend yourself if you agree, if you believe in certain political directions and principles. Let us hear that, right? And so we can respond. And we are not saying before that we are right, but we are saying we have the right to engage. The PNM has not been doing that in my judgment.
I agree with that. And the thing is this, Dr. James, is that I say to everyone, politics is a temporary position. And politics is a temporary position. Right? Anyway, Dr. James, one other person asked, Dr. James, did you take your shots?
I have been trying to. I've gone several times. And now they have said to us, they will call us because they have a data bank. Been waiting. They haven't called me.
Okay. You see? Albert Montano says, and Sam, thanks for this discussion tonight. At least we got an underground report.
Sorry?
You know? Someone says, he says, thank you for the discussion. At least we got an underground report. So you are underground right. So we're getting a report. You know.
I think there are some things I know quite well, I must tell you. And I'm not boasting by saying that because I spend the time to read and discuss.
And that's why we have you.
Good.
Because you know you will give us facts. Right?
Yeah, but I am interested in that and how we can use facts to our advantage. I mean the advantage of the whole, not of our own personal selves.
All right, we had Watson Duke on the program already. We're gonna invite him again. We had Watson Duke on the program. You know, we invite all people to come on our program. So Dr. James, again, if Tommy and Gary doesn't have any question for you, any closing words?
No, that's fine. I'm happy to have been invited, and I hope I made a contribution in some positive way to your program and to the issues in particular as they affect Tobago in particular and Trinidad and Tobago in general. Thanks, guys. We will chat again. You know,
thank you so much.
It'll be my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I would like to have an entire discussion about Tobago, you know, together with maybe yourself and some others. Maybe we could get Watson Duke into the conversation. I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
You know, so we arrange that because I'm very interested in seeing Tobago get what it needs to progress. I would like to see flights being able to land directly internationally into Tobago. Does not have to go through Trinidad. This is something I would like to see that that I think will benefit Tobago directly.
Right, good. And how to expand the economy and all of that.
So, Dr. James, thank you so very kindly.
Thank you so much, Dr. James. Thank you so much.
Right. What's the young lady's name? Diana.
Diana.
I miss her.
Okay. We'll
do.
Yes. Okay then, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
Bye.